So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Laura Montoya. I'm one of the founders of the LatinX NAACL organization, and I'm really happy to be here with you today, really co-locating with the NAACL 2021 conference. The goal of today is to host a social for our members. Obviously, we have some people who aren't as familiar with our organization yet, because NAACL unfortunately does not have enough representation of Latinx or Hispanic or what have you, identifying individuals from Central and South America, and also from Spain. So we have many people, obviously, across the world that are members of our organization, and we would like to help to continue to promote their participation in these different conferences related to artificial intelligence and machine learning. So this will be our second conference or social that's hosted at a conference that specifically specializes in natural language processing or language computation. So we're very excited to have that opportunity to host this type of event at a conference like this with you all today, especially. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so to give you a little bit more context of our organization, and then hopefully also answer some questions that you might have in regards to our organization. And the goal of my presentation is just to give you some background information. If you wouldn't mind holding questions till later on, this will be a quick intro, and then we will move on to our first keynote. And then if you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask me in the Gather Town space during our discussion session. Can everyone see my screen currently? Yes, yep. Got some thumbs up. Okay, wonderful. And it looks like more people are pouring in little by little. So this is the LatinX NAACL organization. What we have created is a global community of Latinx professionals in the AI space. So if you have not familiarized yourself yet with our org, you can do so by going to latinxnai.org to find out more information. The mission of our organization is really to bridge communities, academics, industry, and politicians working to further AI innovation and resources for Latinx individuals globally. We understand that the term Latinx is kind of a new age term and not everyone identifies that way. It is something that a term that was created in the US for people who identify as having Latinx origin or Latin origin. And so we would try to really stay away from any of the debate around that term, but more just try to embrace the culture and the community and ensure that people feel welcome and accepted within the space and at our events specifically. And what we want to do is really provide and create opportunity for Latinx identifying or Latin American identifying individuals. And we do that through driving and supporting research, development, infrastructure, and mentoring programs. The goal to do that is to boost innovation and capabilities and ensure that we really are here to support your work so that we can further the community together and especially create places like this. So for us, we launched in January 2018. And it was really a coalition of different people from all different areas of AI, specifically in education, research, engineering, and social impact. And like I said, we wanted to create opportunity for Latinx and AI individuals in particular. So we've done that through many different ways. One of the ways in which we do that is by hosting official workshops at these large AI and machine learning conferences, as well as events like this, which are smaller socials. But then we also have an online platform that we've built that hosts our members directory. And we have people on that platform from all areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. If you're not familiar with it, you can join it via our online site here at latinxnai.org, or you can go directly to LXAI.app. So it is an app that you can join, currently only available for the web, but it will shortly be available as well separately as an app for iOS and Android. So the key way to really connect with people on this app is through the community forum. So once you get signed in, you can obviously see our forum and all the different posts that people have shared. And of course, we post a lot about our events and different opportunities for you to get involved with on this forum as well. If you wanted to see our members that are on this forum, you can do so by going to lxai.app/public directory. If you are familiar with our organization for quite some time, maybe since 2018, you would know that we started out with just a basic spreadsheet that people would fill in their information, and we would host that publicly online for those who wanted to have their information shared publicly. So this is like the next step for us, where we leveled up a little bit, and we're able to now have full profiles in a more interactive way for our members to communicate and share content and opportunities with each other. So if you're not joined on our app yet, please do so. We would love to have you on there. And then you can also chat with other members directly. So if you click this little button here, you can do direct messaging. You can see our directory. You can, go to the forum, and you can also make posts. So we can and invite other members to join as well. And then you can see your own profile. And depending on how much you post, your profile might look a little bit different. This will share all the content that you have shared specifically right now, as well as a basic blurb about yourself and some background information. We are going to be expanding this profile section shortly as well to include more information about you, your professional history, and then again, make it another way for other people to find you and collaborate with you on research opportunities, and then also for speaking opportunities and so on within our network and our community. So do take advantage of this little thing that we've built so far for you. And then for our research workshops, we have been hosting for a while at the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference now, but we have been expanding the different conferences in which we co-locate. So one of the new ones for this year is the CVPR. And so that one will be taking place on between June 19th and June 25th. And our particular workshop will be taking place on June 19th. We'll also be hosting official workshops in ICML and then also NeurIPS again this year. You can see all of our events, of course, by going to the events tab on our website. So obviously we have NAACL, CVPR, ICML. We'll also be hosting an official workshop at ICCV for the first time this year. So if you're also in the area of computer vision, it would be great to get involved. And we have hosted it so far this year at iClear, EACL. We also host with some of our corporate partners, such as NVIDIA. We've hosted with Twitter this past year, and at LXAI as well. So if you want to keep tabs on all of the events and activities that we have available, the best way to do that is to join our mailing list, or of course the forum. Both links are available on the website. And then we also have another thing that we offer for the community is our travel grant fund. So for any of our official workshops, so those are larger day-long workshops, we do try to support the community in order to attend those full conferences. So the goal is to raise funds, obviously from our corporate partners, and then be able to fund both registration. And then when we are meeting in person, we also try to fund travel. So that includes airfare, hotel accommodations, per diem, and so on for our members who are presenting, and then also for those who are working with our organization, so volunteers, program committee reviewers, and so on. If you can please mute your mic, that would be really appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, great. And then the other thing that we offer for our community is our mentorship program. So this mentorship program was launched last year. It's currently being run by several members of our community who co-locate the mentorship program alongside our major workshops. And the goal is really to take people who are early in their career, whether you are, maybe a master's student, a PhD graduate, maybe a first year in the industry, and you really want to level up and have some mentorship from a more senior person within the community. And this is in all areas of AI and machine learning, including natural language processing. So the goal would be just to fill out the quick application on our website. You can also find that in the tabs at the top here under mentoring. And then, basically describe what your area of research is, what your career interests are, and what type of mentor you would like to be matched with. We do the form of virtual mentoring. And we do our matching system through now an automated system, which we have built, which is open source. If you're curious about that, I can share more information with you as well. But then you are connected with your mentor for 3 meetings. So once a month for basically a 3-month period that, like I said, coincides with a particular conference. And of course, the goal is for that mentor to help you to improve outcomes of your research or better prepare your presentation, or maybe it's for an application for a postdoc position or a new career opportunity. And then obviously we would hopefully get you to the point where you would improve your presentation and make it more effective so that you can publish and present your work if you're doing that at our workshop or at the main conference, or if you're submitting an application for a new career and so on. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. And of course, we want to take this time just to thank all of our annual sponsors. That includes Google Research, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon Science, Apple, NVIDIA, and Salesforce. We do have other workshop-specific sponsors as well, but of course, you'll learn about those during those particular workshops. So with that, I am going to pass the call on to our other organizers so that they can, of course, tell you a little bit about themselves. So you can find the list of organizers for this particular event at the bottom of the page, as well as you can find the schedule and our keynote speakers. But our organizers are here, so I would like each of them just to do a really quick introduction. Let's start with Diana. Diana, would you like to do a quick intro?
Yes, thank you, Laura, for the great overview. Okay, so very quickly, my name is Diana Galvan Sosa. I am originally from Mexico City, but I've been living in Japan for the past 6 years. I am currently associated to the RIKEN Center for Advanced Intelligence Project. And I am very happy to have like all of you here. I hope we can like get to know each other, like discuss about research or like anything that you want. So yes, welcome everybody.
Thank you, Diana. And we also have Thiago here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thiago. I'm originally from Brazil. At the moment, I'm physically located at the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil, and the capital of the state is Belo Horizonte. I'm a postdoc at Federal University of Minas Gerais. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, happy to be organized this event, and I hope to straight the bounds with like the LatinX community involved with NLP.
Thank you very much, Thiago. We're going to skip Martin for the moment, since he is our keynote speaker. You're going to learn a lot about him in just a moment. Is Ivan on the call with us today? Ivan, would you like to unmute?
I think he hasn't joined yet. Yeah, okay. I think
not a problem. That's okay. So let's move on to Rosanna. Rosanna, are you with us to do a quick intro?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, I'm Rosanna. I'm a PhD candidate at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. Thiago is my advisor, and I'm also a researcher at the Laboratory for Experimentation Translation, and I work in natural language generation and conversational AI. I'm also a member of Widening NLP, and recently I joined Brasileiras em PLN. It's a group to talk about NLP in Brazil. So I would like, I'm very happy to be here and to promote more diversity in NLP. So I hope we have a great social today and also on Thursday, and have a great event.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. And then Lois, Maria Luisa Santiago, she also goes by Lois. Lois, did you want to unmute and say hi?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for some. My name is Lois, or Maria Luisa Santiago. I'm the Operations and Logistics Coordinator for LXAI and LXAI. I've been with the organization since August of last year, and I take care of the general communications for the organization. So if you need anything else, you can reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lois. And then I've given you a little intro to myself. Oh, what I didn't say though, for those who are not familiar with me personally, my background, my family is from Colombia. I was born and raised in the US, and you know, I work obviously now with LXAI Institute and LatinX and AI. as well as a few other organizations, and I'm very happy to be here today as well. So what I would like to do is turn over the mic to Martin, who is our first keynote speaker for today. This is actually the second social he has been helping us with for the organizational side, but this is the first one he will be also speaking for this particular event. And he is a PhD on computational linguistics in Saarland University in Germany. And he will be sharing a talk on bringing your NLP research to the world, specifically on good practices on sharing your research with end users. And Martin, feel free to give a little bit more background information. I'm going to also stop sharing my screen so that you may share your slides and then kind of take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So while I share my screen, I would like to thank you all for being here in this talk. As we've said, my name is Martin Villalba. I guess can you see my screen? I guess you're seeing my Zoom screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, wait for it. Okay. Now you don't. So thank you all. So my name is Martin Villalba. As we just said, I come from Argentina. I am currently working in Germany. Essentially, I started my career as a programmer, as a computer scientist in the University of Córdoba. Then I started working as a system administrator. I then moved to natural language processing, and right now I'm doing text classification in industry. And today, one of the issues that I've noticed is that there's a lot of research that it's essentially sleeping in all of our computers. And this motivated us to bring you the topic of our talk today, which is essentially bringing your NLP research to the world. That is the point of today's talk, is going to be essentially like a path of different practices and technologies that you can use to ensure that this great model that you have trained, or this great new concept for processing NLP that you have been working on all of these months, doesn't need to sleep on your computer, but it can be actually shared with everyone. The way that this talk is going to be structured is around these three topics. Part one is going to be about what I call sharing with future you, because before you can share your research with other people, you need to learn how to share it with you. Part number two is going to be about how to share your research with other scientists who are more likely to be fine with a bit more technical stuff. And finally, for part three, we're going to move to sharing your research with the world, how to put your research in the hand of end users. And if you, in particularly, here's a little spoiler, if you have been doing crowdsourcing, or if you're interested on interacting with the internet in any way, I would like to pause here and talk about a little bit about some particularly good practices to keep in mind. All of the good practices that we're going to talk about today are about good communication, are about how to ensure that those that want to use your research can have the easiest time in the world, have absolutely no difficulties. So if all you get from this presentation is one thing, is that clear communication is key, both for your research and for your career. And so with this, we're going to move into topic number one, which is what I call sharing your research with future you. Future you, it's a term that my advisor used to use, and essentially what this means with me, and tell me if this has happened to you. Maybe you wrote some results for a paper, you sent it to publish, the review process took a couple months. 5 months later, a reviewer comes to you and asks for, this paper looked great, but we would like to see this more data or more experiments. And you have absolutely no idea what your code used to do. You forgot how to get it to run. You know that there was some specific patch that you used to use to get everything to run together. This is what I mean with sharing with future you. That is practices for ensuring that you can, at every point, come back to your research and have no problem with this. And the very first practice that I'm going to mention, and for the record, I'm going to talk about Python today because I think it's the language that is more common nowadays in NLP, but none of this is exclusive to Python, is to put comments in your code. If you're a computer science student, or computer engineering, you've heard this a lot of times. So instead of just saying something so general, I'm going to say something very specific that is if you had a tiny function such as this one, which I have called getNumHappy, I'm going to suggest that at the very least, you do these exact 3 things. Every time you write a function, you write what the function does, what are its parameters, that is what each of its input variable expects the input to be, and what the function returns. Those 3 things are all you need to, all I'm asking for you today is to put the comment in your code, and trust me, you will be so thankful to past you once you start doing this. Another good practice is that if you use a specific reference, if you are implementing an algorithm for a specific paper, this is a great place to put it in. But as I said, this is more on the optional side. And once you have commented your code, I'm going to very strongly suggest that you put your code under version control. For those of you who are not familiar with version control, I'm not going to get into into a lot of detail into it. But one thing that I am going to say is that there is a lot of commands that you can learn about version control. I'm going to suggest that you just learn a couple. That is, those would be, so as you can see on the example here, if I had this file, I would say, I would learn first pull to bring changes that someone may have shared with me. If I'm collaborating with someone, then I bring the changes into my computer. You can add files, which in this case, I'm adding happyfunction.py, and I'm making a commit. If you're not familiar with Git, the idea is that every time you change something or you add a new function or you fix a bug, you make a so-called commit, which is a record that keeps track of how your code evolved over time. And when you use push, you send it back into the cloud. And so people can now use your changes. I'm not going to say that you should learn pull requests, but that's a very nice thing to learn if you have the time. Nowadays, so I said version control, and nowadays that mostly means Git. Git is not the only version control that it's out there, but it's the most popular, and that's why you should use that. A word of personal and probably controversial advice for those who might be new. If you see pick a tutorial and you see that they start talking about rebasing or changing history, this tutorial is not for you. Run away as fast as you can. And more important, don't panic. When people tell you that Git is easy and then they start talking about changing your history and doing all these weird things, just take a deep breath and remember, it's not you, it's them. And finally, a super short, let's say the bow on top is that you should have a README. A README is a simple text document that you can put in your code that just tells you what the project does, how to install it, and how to use it. And this example that I have here, I built with this online tool, readme.so. I can recommend it. And since we are talking about sharing with the world, I also strongly recommend that you pick a license for your code. It may not mean much to you, but when people want to use your code for something in their own applications, they need to know under which terms they can do this. And so now that we are talking about sharing with other people, we can move into part 2. That is how to share with other scientists. I'm going to mention this in easy, medium, or hard, depending on how easy it is for you to work with it. The easiest way that you can make it easy for other people to use our code is to use a virtual environment. If you are not familiar with them, the idea is that you can essentially, so there are, I would say, 3 main advantages. A, if you have a computer that it's not your computer, but it's your organization's computer, you can install packages without having to call your system administrator every other week. More important, it isolates your dependencies. If you create a new virtual environment for every new project, then you can avoid this problem that I know it has bitten me a lot of times. You have one version of a library, you install a new one, which conflicts with the previous one, so your code stops working, and then you uninstall the new one, but the old one is already broken, and now you need a week to solve what's gone wrong. In this way, you can keep your dependencies away from each other, and every piece of code can simply deal with its own packages. And more important for the purpose of today's talk is that it makes your environment reproducible. What I mean by that is that you can see here, I have installed a dependency, in this case, Blinkfire, which is simply a tool for splitting sentences into words. And if I use this command called pip freeze, then it says, look, in your environment, you have installed this one library. So I can save that to a file, in this case, requirements.txt. And if something happens to my computer and I need to go back to my code, all I need is this one simple file to restore my environment to the way I had it before. And in this way, this makes it super easy for other researchers to work with your code, because all they need to do is they go into your GitHub or GitLab page, which you already made, they download your code, they install your dependencies, done. If you want to move, if you are in particular, so if you are using Linux, I would suggest there's a tool called virtualm. If you're on Windows, or if you need some particular libraries such as TensorFlow or RDKit, if you work with chemistry, which I sometimes do, you might also want to take a look at Anaconda or the Conda 4 packages. A bit going up on medium difficulty, that would be Docker. So if you haven't heard about Docker, the idea is we talk about isolating your dependencies, but then we can bring this idea a bit a level up and say, well, why not isolating your entire operating system? The way that Docker works is that you have a file called the Docker file, which is here on the right. You see a very small example of me starting from an operating system that has absolutely nothing but Python, and then installing my dependencies, and then putting some files in this virtual computer and running my code. This is, of course, since now you've gone from isolating libraries to isolating your entire environment, which means that this absolutely guarantees that what you have built can be rebuilt at any time in the future. The reason why I put this on the medium category is because on one hand, Docker is a bit resource heavy, that is particularly hard drive. It really likes to use your hard drive. And the commands, if you're not used to it, can be a little cryptic. You need to get used to essentially what are containers and images and so on. But if you have a server administrator at hand who can give you a little help, I would totally consider using Docker in your research. And finally, this as a complex issue, I'm not going to get too much into detail, but just so you know that you are available, that it's a thing that you can do is you could publish a package. Every time, as earlier today in my example, I said pip install Blinkfire, and that just worked, and that's how we all install our dependencies. And the way that this works is because the creators of that code went through the trouble of putting their code in a package, and they uploaded it to essentially the Python library. You can use the official Python guide. You can see it here on screen. There are tools that you can also use. So Poetry is one of them. That it's supposed to make this entire process a bit easier. And one particular thing that I'm going to mention, if your research is about transformers, then you should definitely consider taking a look at the Hugging Face people, in case you are not familiar with them. They are a repository. They will take care of hosting your transformer model for you. And they will take care of giving it making it available to the entire world. And so now that we are sharing with more and more people, then we come to the third part. That is how we share it with the entire world. And I talked earlier today about crowdsourcing. And here, before we actually start sharing, I would like to give you a small piece of advice that is, I think, it's critical when you talk about putting your code out there, which is what Bruce Schneier, a security researcher, calls a security mindset. The idea of having a security mindset is that every time you look at a piece of your own code, you ask yourself, how could someone use this code the wrong way? How could something go wrong? Either because someone did something by mistake, or because they are actually intentionally trying to use your codes in ways that it's not supposed to be. So to give a simple example, this is the small function that I wrote earlier before. And it's just supposed to count how many times the word happy appears in a specific text. and if you look at it with a security mindset, you might say, well, but what if the person giving me the text actually gives me a number? And the answer is the code will break because you cannot convert numbers to lowercase in Python. That's going to throw an error. So instead, I should have said, then before I actually run my function, I'm going to check that what I'm actually receiving it's a string and it's not a number, or it's not none. And then you might, if you're working, I'm sure you are all familiar with this. If you're working with, for instance, a neural network, it can happen that your network is heavy and takes maybe a lot of memory, or maybe your research is on tweets and you are only used to dealing with short text. And so now I come and ask to you, so what if I take your neural network, which expects at most a couple hundred words, and I feed it the entire text of War and Peace? And having a security mindset means thinking about all of these types of questions every time you put something on the internet. In this case, I would specifically truncate my text to a specific length before I do anything further with it. And this is particularly useful if you have done some work on crowdsourcing. I have a couple more, a couple extra slides if you want to talk about this later on. But the point is, once you put something on the internet and are giving people a monetary incentive to be done with your task as quick as they can, you need to account for those who will try to get that reward as fast as they can, but also for those who may misunderstand your instructions, not by malice, just by pure chance, and may end up essentially doing something that you didn't expect to happen. So now that we have this in mind, now we come back down to our code again. Now, maybe you don't want to deal with the whole part about web design. Maybe you are not a web designer, you never wanted to be one, and you would like someone else to take care of this. Then I'm going to suggest that the perfect solution for you is to add an API to your code. An API is essentially an interface in which internally in your own computer, you might pull lots of files for lots of different places, and you might have this very strange input format. But as far as your interface concerns, you just say, I'm going to have my own server here, and I'm going to have a so-called endpoint called how happy that is going to receive a string, and it's going to return how many times the word happy appears in this text. This example here is done with Flask. If you need to do an API quick, I cannot recommend this tool strong enough. As you can see here, that calling and see if you have done your research in Python, one of the reasons why Flask is great is because it's already Python, so it's going to be easier for you to talk to the code that you already have. And once you have this API, you can give it to one of the many, many services who will gladly give you code that you just need to, they will just ask, okay, where is your API? What are the standard parameters that we need? You give it to them, and they will provide a platform for you. This specific example that I have here is from flow.ai, but I can assure you there are many, many interfaces out there that will take care of this for you. And this brings me to my final point today, which is maybe you do like actually web interfaces. Maybe you always wanted to build websites, or you feel that this is something that you would like to get into. Then the best way to put your research into the hands of the users is to have a complete website where they can play with what you have essentially built. And I am going to suggest that if your code is Python, I'm going to suggest Django. Django is very similar to Flask, but it just has a lot more integrated functionality, such as taking care of your users, taking care of mixing pages that need to talk to your server with static pages and so on. And once you get, they have actually very good documentation to get you up and running. One very small point that you might, if you start playing because you like how I presented this today, and you start playing, you suddenly realize that after about an hour of your first tutorial, your website looks like this, and you really, maybe you don't want to show your users like this, because we all know that even though we have poured all of our hours of work into our NLP pipeline, users actually want it to look nice, then fear not, you don't need to go do a web design course. I'm going to suggest instead you can use a library such as Bootstrap that will give you templates where you can essentially forget about the graphic design part of the code. You just download the template, copy a couple files, and suddenly exactly the same text that you had before that may have this website that you created and which was nice, but maybe didn't look as nice, now can look completely professional. And so with this, we come back to the end. We have done a bit of, I don't expect you to remember all of this, but I think this is a bit of, I would say, all of the tiny steps in the path to sharing your research with final users, starting from how to make your code nicer, adding comments and using version control, then to sharing it with your colleagues, making it easier for them to pull your code, and finally to share it with the world, either by building your own website from scratch or by implementing an API and letting someone else take care of it. That's all I wanted to talk to you today. I would like to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, I will be more than glad to answer them.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was a very wonderful and in-depth presentation. We really appreciate it. Let's all give him a round of applause, either through the Zoom app or you can unmute yourself as well. Yep, clap, clap as well in the chat room. So thank you very much. That was wonderful. So we do have some time here for open discussion before we move to our gathered town space. Just for some Q&A is what I meant. So if anyone has any quick questions that they would like to ask Martin, I could actually maybe start with a quick one as well, just to kind of get the ball rolling. I'm wondering, Martin, in your experience so far, what do you think is the best way or tool to share both your models for doing natural language processing work and then also your data? What are the best tools that you have used in the past to share those, either with the general public or with other researchers?
Right. So as far as models go, I think the best experience I have had is when I'm looking for a code that does something. So one specific example was when I didn't want to implement attention in my model myself, and I needed someone who could provide this for me. And I went into this guy's GitHub, and he had a very clear README page where he said, here is how you implement this. Here you have an example of how to put it in your model. So I think that was, for as far as code goes, I think that the easier you make it for me to start running your code, the higher the chance I'm going to either use it, I'm not only use it, but also to recommend it to people. Now, when it goes to sharing either code or model, I think I meant model or to share data. I had very good experience actually with, I think for the type of work that I typically do, I'm happy when I go to someone's webpage and they have a link which says, here, just download this file from my server, and it just downloads. My second favorite would be when it's in some type of cloud drive, like Google Drive or Microsoft or whatever. The reason that this is my second favorite is because on one hand, I understand that it completely saves you for having to deal with paying for the bandwidth for these models of data that can be really big. But I sometimes have to deal with the proxy that blocks my request, and then I need to go to my system administrator. Again, the easier it is for me, the better. And I would say between those two, I would also say the least I have to think about this, the better. For instance, I know that when you install the Facebook FastTech library, there's a command that you can use that will download a model for you and save it in your hard drive. And I don't need to worry about where it comes from. It's just they just give me the instructions, I follow them, and they work. So that is my favorite way to share either data or big models when it just works.
Wonderful, thank you. And if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat. We can read it off for you as well. Let's give everyone just a moment here, see if there are any more questions. You know, and I actually do have one quick follow-up. So how do you feel about Jupyter Notebooks? I know you mentioned Anaconda earlier, but do you think that's a good tool to use to share as well, either models or your data sets?
I'm going to go, so I think they are a great tool. That's not for me. So I heard the talk earlier today about someone who remembered when they went from a typewriter to a computer, and that is almost my generation. So I grew up with a lot of, let's say, the more difficult way of doing research. And to me, code has to go from top to bottom. And with research notebooks, you can actually kind of jump around. And that specific part, I'm not, it tends to, hits me in the wrong spot, I would say, which is also one of the, and the same happens to me with R, for instance, or RStudio to be precise. But there is so much people who really, really enjoy working with Jupyter notebooks and iterating with them, that I think that for me to say not to use them would be close to, I think someone may come and take away my computer science degree. I definitely recommend the Jupyter notebooks. They are a great way of essentially just giving someone a file and saying, look, here's the code. And not only you get to see how you get all together, you get this mix of the code and the results of the code, and maybe even some graphs that really help cementing makes the distance between the code that you have written and the results. It brings it much closer. And again, if your users are not all angry programmers like me, they're going to love it. So yes, I do think that Jupyter notebooks are a great way of sharing your research.
Thank you. And we do have another question in the chat that says, do you use something to store the different experiments you run, both the result and the code used to generate it, and having in mind that code changes throughout time?
Right. So I do keep track of my experiments with MLflow. It's the main reason why. So I know that exists, that there are plenty of other solutions, maybe or maybe not for sure. Some even have more features, but in my case, the fact that I can that MLflow doesn't have so many bells and whistles is actually one of the reasons why I like it, because once tools start getting complicated, sometimes I get the feeling that they are getting more in my way, that's actually making it easier for me to keep track of my research. I have, but I do hook up my training code to the MLflow API, so I can upload my model once it's done. I have to admit though that I don't keep as good a track between the version of a code that generated a model with the binary of the model itself. The way that I'm working now to solve that is essentially with Docker. I am building Docker machines for all of the code that actually needs to go in production. And because I am doing it, I know that it can be a bit of a pain sometimes. So it's what has worked for me. I'm not sure that it's the best way to go about it. It's a good way. Whether it's the best or not, well, you need to play a bit with Docker and figure out this is right for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again. Everyone give them another round of applause.